Pretty amazing week this week. Something I didn't think that would play out the way it played. But less than 24 hours just ago, President Biden made the decision not to shift the August 31st deadline to withdraw our troops from Afghanistan. Even though some of our strongest allies from France and Britain and Germany requested it. Think for one moment, why is the UK and France and Germany there? Because 20 years ago, America was attacked. They were there to help defend us, and they requested a stay to go longer so their own citizens could get removed. The president now made the announcement that he will not, allowing the Taliban to direct our foreign policy. And now, with the very real prospect of thousands of Americans still stranded in Afghanistan on September 1st, the Biden administration is willing to accept the fact that they'll be leaving Americans behind in a Taliban stronghold. The president's misguided decisions run the risk of creating the largest international hostage situation we have ever faced as a nation. Yesterday, President Biden had an opportunity to address the public and answer questions about the ongoing crisis in Afghanistan. Instead, he made us wait a number of hours and then touted $5 trillion liberal wish list that will increase greater inflation and transform our country in the worst way possible. Then he delivered a few minutes worth of remarks on the evacuation efforts, but did not say how many Americans are still stranded. The most embarrassing part, though, is that he refused to take questions. And he turned his back and walked away, an image that has come to define him and his presidency. He turned his back on our own citizens stranded in Afghanistan. He turned our back on our allies and partners. He has turned his back on his duties as a commander-in-chief. We have a Democrat majority that is following the same path. Speaker Pelosi called an emergency session just this week. We weren't the only country to do so. In the UK, they called the parliament back. But the difference in the UK, their focus was on their citizens in Afghanistan and getting them out. Pelosi worked late into the night while we were here, but nothing to do with Afghanistan. Speaker Pelosi asked the help of the president to make phone calls, not to pass any bills, to put resources to get more Americans out of Afghanistan. It was to pass close to $5 trillion. Not to debate it, but to deem it. Every single Democrat voted for that, and every single Democrat voted against Congressman Gallagher's PQ that would ask that we could get the number on a daily basis of how many Americans are in Afghanistan and to stay until the mission is done that all Americans are out. That $5 trillion, not 1 cent will be used in the situation of Afghanistan. It's a complete failure of leadership. If you listen to Speaker Pelosi's speech yesterday, great day of pride for America and Democrats. A great day of pride for American Democrats. That's what Speaker Pelosi said on the floor. Not mentioning any Gold Star families, not mentioning the veterans, even those who serve in her own conference, who had she stayed the whole hearing, could have heard the comments that they made inside the briefing, the frustration that they felt as well. I can't imagine the amount of pain being caused to our veterans. We're less than just 3 weeks away from the 20th anniversary. I want to take a moment and I want to speak directly to them, to the Gold Star families and to the veterans. You did everything your country asked of you. You should be proud that you helped take the fight to the enemy and you prevented a major terrorist attack from happening on our own soil. For those veterans who understandably need some extra support during this time, know that you are not alone. Please do not hesitate to reach out for help. Contact for the Veterans Crisis Line, call 1-800-273-8255. That's 1-800-273-8255. Or text 838-255. And the website is veteranscrisisline.net. We are grateful for your service, and we'll never forget the sacrifices each and every one who've made. You deserve a government who will not stop until all Americans are out of Afghanistan. We will continue to hold them accountable, and that is what our mission is. I know there's been a great deal amount of mistakes in one of the greatest tragedies this country has seen on a foreign policy level. Right now, our whole focus should be just getting Americans out, but there has to be accountability in the future, that this mistake can never happen again. There's many places we'll have to look, not just from the State Department, to the intel, to decisions that are being made, but even in Congress itself. This Democrat majority and Adam Schiff shifted the entire Intel Committee to be one of impeachment and political. What did we miss? Devin Nunes has warned us time and before. A number of hearings they wanted to look on an international basis of what's the threats out there. We now have a border that is open. When I traveled to it earlier this year, it was then that we found we had been arresting people on the terrorist watch list from Yemen. When I brought forth that on a press conference, I was criticized by Democrats. Congressman Gallegos. He said I was not telling the truth, I was lying. He has not apologized for that. We now have 5,000 prisoners that were released in Afghanistan. We have more than 100 different countries of individuals coming across our southern border. We have a president that opened it up. Now is the time to close it. This country is less safe today than we were 20 years ago based upon the actions that have just taken place. Allowing Taliban to control our foreign policy, weaponizing them, reports now that they have more Black Hawks than Australia. From the aircraft, to the drones, to the weaponry. They have more support than they had before just from their own military buildup of the weapons that they've taken from America. Now a border that is open and a fear of what the future holds. This has all got to change. And the presidency has to change its foreign policy as well. With that, let's open it up for questions. Yes, ma'am.
Thanks, Leader McCarthy. So 2 members have gone to Afghanistan yesterday. Can I get your reaction to their trip? What are you advising members who are interested in going to Afghanistan and neighboring countries at this time?
Not to go. We need the military's all their effort used on bringing people back home. These are 2 individuals who I didn't know transpired that they went until after they were there. They're both veterans. They're both frustrated. They have an administration that won't tell them the answers to how many Americans are left or those Afghans that actually probably worked with them and helped them. They feel frustrated. They come back in a special session and no time is spent. Yesterday we were allowed 90 minutes to have a briefing. While people were still lined up, a number of members, the Democrats shut it down and said, no, we have to have a hard break to go back and debate the $5 trillion bill. I objected. I thought this was more important. But they would not allow them to even be able to talk to the Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense, and others, lined up, Republicans and Democrats alike. But that's what they chose the time to do. So yes, it's not the best idea to go there, but I understand their frustration by the lack of any answers from this administration, from a speaker who spends late into the night, you all covered it, into her office. Not one moment of that time was spent on getting Americans home from Afghanistan. What do you think those Americans were doing late at night trying to find a path to get to that airport? That the president told them it was safe to go, but now we're finding they were beaten. Not one moment was spent on it. Not $1 was passed this time in Congress. $5 trillion, just deemed, not debated. None of that money going to help an American get back. And then they pass a political campaign bill to change election law. They are the most self-serving individuals it showed this week than at any given time. Of all weeks of what we should have focused upon, not any moment of time to do it. So yes, I don't think it's right that they went, but I understand their frustration of why they would want to go, by the lack of answers they were getting, the time they served their nation, the individuals they knew over there, the calls. All members are getting calls of people stuck there. They're frustrated trying to work with the State Department, can't get answers. They realize it's life and death. So yes, they made a decision to try to do something on their own.
Are you hearing from members that might be going, and are you hearing from
Any
members
member that I've heard that might go, I explained to them that I don't think they should. I think it creates a greater risk. You've got enough Americans over there that could be held hostage. They'd make a point out of a member of Congress. I think you'd take military away from doing their job of getting as many Americans out we can. How many know that they're going to be left? The president now has made the date the 31st. The 31st is when everybody needs to be gone. So they're going to start pulling military out now. We watched what the president told us, that the Taliban would let you go to the airport. The Taliban's now shutting it down. We watched that people aren't being beaten, but that's the report that we're getting. I mean, I watched the president have a press conference and walk away afterwards, and 30 minutes later have a conference call with the Secretary of Defense, Secretary of State, Joint Chiefs, and they contradict what the president just told us. Why wouldn't we spend our time on that while we're in Congress? Why are we departing now? The Speaker has control over that. The same way that she changed the Intel Committee with Adam Schiff to be a political committee instead of looking. We're three co-equal branches. We should have been having hearings on what's going on over there. We should have been able to gather that they would collapse this fast. But Adam Schiff was too focused on impeachment than doing the job he was supposed to do. Yes, sir.
Speaker, just to clarify something you said to her real quick before I ask you one other thing. What could the House have passed this week that would have made a material or immediate difference in Afghanistan with the Senate gone until September? You said that the Speaker didn't do anything to set aside money.
Shouldn't do anything to set aside time even.
Right.
What did we...
What should you have done this week?
You know, the Speaker many times says, you know, your values says a lot about you. Time is of your value, right? How much time did we spend on this while the world was watching? How much time did we spend on it where Afghans were clinging to our planes and falling off? How much time did we spend on finding more Americans that were actually there? What we could have done is actually take up Gallagher's bill. Tell us how many Americans are there right now. Make a statement of Congress where we're co-equal branches, that we will not leave until every American comes home. At the very least, that's what we should have done. We should have held hearings of what more do we need there. Do we need more troops there to make sure it's safer, to get people home faster? Then do it. Send the message to the president. We're our own body. We can speak for ourselves, and we should. But under this majority, the Speaker decided we would not. The only thing we would speak about is $5 trillion for a socialist wish list. They care more about their socialist spending than they do saving Americans' lives, because that's what they spent their time on, that's what they spent their emotion on, that's what they even brought the president in to call their own members. They threatened their own members' spouses' jobs. They threatened political money for a campaign just to vote. They made no threat to save American lives. They cut us off when members were standing in line to have a discussion with the Secretary of State, the Secretary of Defense, and the Joint Chiefs. They said, no, we had a hard and fast time period. It has to be over. We have to get back to the floor to debate everything but Afghanistan. Why members from both parties were standing in line requesting the opportunity. So yes, there's a lot that we could have done.
The January 6th committee is issuing a document preservation request to telecom companies for contacts of that day. And there's been suggestions that lawmakers would also be part of that documentation request. Are you aware of it? And in terms of your own records, would you just turn them over to the committee if they asked?
Well, the only thing I learned more about this committee is more political than it is. You have reports now that the FBI is finished with their report. And I think it goes against everything the politics of the Democrats want to believe. You now watch the Democrats in a time of Afghanistan that they want to use their majority power to get people's phone records. They come from members of Congress, they're coming for everybody's thing. It's kind of amusing to me of how political they will go with this. I told the American public who I talked to that day. I literally went and talked to the American public on 3 different networks that day. I don't know. The real question has to be, the other report that came out this week is that the FBI told the Capitol Police beforehand there was a threat. They knew on December 14th there was problems. They had Inspector General reports of the failures of the top leadership in Capitol Police with not allowing them to have the training